Well, hi, I'm Brian Stevens, and we are also dealing with technology issues right now. So I've got, as always, my partner in crime, Adrian's over here. He's off camera so that people will focus on me instead of him. So I had to do the really professional swing the camera over to you. I'm going to cut through this pretty quickly, but I want you to understand what this webinar is about today. And it's about the future. It is once again, it's not about look, we're in the middle of a pandemic right now. We're in the middle of a massive business and personal disruption. And my goal is to help you navigate that situation so you can come out as cleanly as possible ahead of, well, the competition, right? Anything you do, especially in America, everything's in a competitive atmosphere. Now, I put this crystal ball up here, Adrian, because all too often, I think that people confuse strategy with tactics. And right now, we are in a very tactical situation. And tactics is really all about day-to-day doing things. Are your team coming to work? Are you going to work from home? Are you going to increase paid sick leave? What's Congress going to do with the laws? All very responsive. Strategy is not about that. Strategy is predictive, but it's not crystal ball predictions. Like this, it's not. The reality of it is, we're actually kind of blessed right now with hundreds of years of history that we can do something more than just a crystal ball to predict for the future. And so I'm gonna help you today, right now, in the next 30 minutes, develop an 18-month plan. Now, I'm gonna tell you why it needs to be 18 months. And Chase Peeler's over here also fielding questions and gonna tell me to speed up or slow down as he needs it. So, like, look, the Blockbuster example is it's almost cliche now to talk about, but they lack strategy in their index. And so if you're above 30 and you're on this webinar, you know what Blockbuster was. And quickly, they had the opportunity to think strategically about taking care of their customers. And they chose not to mail initially, to mail their videos. So they didn't want to mail their videos because it didn't fit their business model. They didn't predict what their customers needed. It seems kind of crazy, right? And then they didn't predict what the internet would do. So they failed twice, and that's why they're out. But it wasn't because of a lack of a crystal ball. It was a lack of understanding that things change rapidly. And so you got to prepare for that. So I equate this pandemic with more of a hurricane predictive model, not a crystal ball at all. And anytime you got a hurricane, and that's like, look, put that visual in your head. There's a hurricane. It's in the Gulf Coast. Where's it going to come? What's it going to affect? Is it going to go through Texas and go all the way to Seattle at this point and up through Alaska? Or is it going to, creep on the East Coast? And in every predictive analysis, there's different percentages. There's different chances that each one of these lines that you see can occur. Well, it's 20% the yellow line, and it's 5%. I don't know colors because I'm a guy, right? But the mauve line, I don't even know what that means. But green or teal or whatever it is. But there's different percentages, but they all can be predicted. So 18 months. Why am I recommending to all of our clients, all of our teammates, to begin with an 18-month analysis? Well, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you predict for 18 months? So here's the history of pandemics really quickly. I'm not going to wear you out with this. I'm going to get you right into action items. But the likelihood of a pandemic, and the reason why we're shuttling down, I think everyone knows this by now, is to flatten out the curve. It doesn't mean people are not going to get sick. It does not mean that people are not going to get this illness. We're just trying to slow the rate down so we do not completely envelop the healthcare system that we've got. So we're trying to slow it down. And the experts, not Brian, I'm no medical doctor, but what the experts say, not the social media trolls, is that one of the ways to combat this is to go into quarantine for a while, and then come out of the quarantine for a while, and then go back into quarantine for a while, and do that in and out. Now, why I predict 18 months is because of the nature of a vaccine. In the United States, even fast-tracking a vaccine, and I think there are 3 being tested right now that are starting human trials. It takes 14 months to analyze whether or not it makes things worse or better. That means if you look at the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic and other pandemics that have occurred before then, it's taken months and months and months to get through this. And this one is really it's fast and it's moving. And so they're going to have to potentially, we're going to have to start up and shut down and start up and shut down. And so the reason why I would predict 18 months is because let's assume that this pandemic only lasts 6 months. Well, cool. You get right back to operating as normal sooner. And if it lasts more than 18 months, well, in 3 and 5 months, you'll start to see that it's going to last longer than 18 months and you start to adjust your plan. So
as long as you think strategically,
well,
see that.
Well, and that's what strategic thinking is all about, is predicting and preparing. The one thing that bothers me to no end is people that say, well, how could Blockbuster know? I mean, you're looking at it with hindsight, Brian. It's because they didn't sit around and brainstorm with their team all the scenarios that could happen. And that's what we're going to walk you through today is how do you get together with your team, predict all these different models, and then prioritize and figure out which ones you want to talk about and deal with and which ones you don't. That's what strategy is all about. And then you start to figure out the tactics to implement those different strategies if need be. But I think you got to start predicting 18 months. And I'm gonna hit some examples with you and some other things you need to think about today. So the only time you see me looking at my clock is I want to make sure that I'm timely. I want to get these done in about 30 minutes. And then, don't forget to start sending those questions. So the bane of my existence is the difference between people using complex competitive intelligence. Don't worry, I'm not going to define all this stuff, and just your gut, right? Your guts can be really valuable, but it can be really bad too. This guy named Porter, for those of you that went to business school, came up with these forces that affect our business and our life. And he had 5 forces: the markets, products, customers, what do customers want? I mean, if Blockbuster would have predicted what their customers wanted, convenience, they could have predicted for that. I've added some additional forces that affect businesses because I'm so cocky, I guess. Well, things have changed since Porter developed this in the 1960s, Chase. Okay, it's not that I'm just cocky. It's government now, and we're seeing that can influence how your business reacts, and also shareholders. I didn't write the shareholders things down, but all these forces are things you need to look at and then plan for what's going to happen. But it's more than just your gut. It's the combination of these two things. And that's really what I'm going to encourage us to do is how do you analyze what could happen and then trust your gut to some extent, but not fully. And that's where we're going to get to today. It'll make more sense once we start to kind of map out the examples, I think, right, Adrian?
Absolutely,
All right.
yes.
All right, good. So we conduct a lot of strategic war games. Here at CASA, I've been traveling for years and years and years, where for strategic plans, and mind you, a crisis or pandemic, business disruption, it's a strategic plan with another analysis attached to it. It's just now you're analyzing a new set of facts. And the way that war games operate is it uses concepts called gameology, like games, where you're going to break your team down into pods, different groups, 2 people, 3 people, no more than about 2 to 8 people. And you're going to have them first brainstorm all the possible scenarios. Now, brainstorming is about saying yes. And I'm simplifying these war games that we conduct for companies for you to kind of get to it really quickly. But break your team up and have them list out every potential thing that you need to be thinking about. Don't have them try to solve any of these problems right now. Just have them list every idea. So, how are we going to get the products that we need? How's our team going to work? What about cybersecurity? They just need to build a list of things to consider. You do this separately, not together, so you avoid things like group think. Okay, I wish I had so much more time to get into the psychology of it, but you break them down, and then everyone comes back together to build the massive list of what you all need to be thinking about. And your team's going to use that gut, but also by splitting up, you're going to get new ideas that you don't get when you bring everyone together, or if you do in isolation. So break your teams up and ask them to think about everything you need to be thinking about. Just make a list. I know, pretty simple, right? Then we're going to figure out how to prioritize that list and actually deal with things that could or could not happen. So that'll be the next stage. So that's the basic gist, is combining all this intelligence with your gut in these war game scenarios. And we call them war games, business war games, because you're going to game out different scenarios when we get to it. So that's really the basic gist, is I want you to start planning for the future. And I know everybody right now is into tactics. Those that survive will spend some fraction of their time preparing for the future. I'm going to really encourage you, get those implementation steps, but this weekend, next week, spend 10% of your time mapping out some scenarios for the future. Just 10%. 5% is good, right? Don't get too lost in the implementation. I know you guys are girls, and everyone that's on here is going to do that because they're actually paying attention to this webinar. Tell your friends to do it too. All right. So we talked about this in last week's webinar. If you didn't do it, we can send you the link. But we talked about the lizard brain and what stops you from thinking long term. It's not your fault. It's just the way you're built, where that fight or flight mentality comes in, where you're designed to either, beat it up or run from it. And we're going to get you to slow down as modern creatures and think. So strategize. So I guess I just say this really quickly to let you know it's not your fault. It's wrapped up into your DNA, and you've got to really slow down to do this. And you got to be purposeful. So right now, what I want you to do is schedule a time to strategize next week. Just put it on your calendar right now. And you can do this through conference calls with your team. You can bring in outside advisors. I'm going to kind of give you a framework on how to do that. All right. So, this is just another graph about stress level that I think that what's happening right now is people are on I think it would be on your right side if you're looking at the screen, this panic and anxiety. And I want you to keep everyone stressed. Stress is okay, but I need you to get them focused. See, you see that focused word up there, focused around the future and how you're going to navigate this. And these games will help you do that. I think I probably made my point on the need for this.
Yeah.
If I didn't, I will call me up and I'll yell at you about it. It'll be a lot of fun for me. All right. So this was just a slide to give me some direction to make sure I was occupying your time correctly. So first thing you got to do is, we talked about this before, I've talked about this for years, is you need to get your rapid response team together. Now this rapid response team, where they're dealing with the implementation, the tactical things, now they need to start turning their mind to the future. Now the rapid response team is just composed of those people that have the ability to think. So really everyone on your team can be on it at this point, especially if you want to start breaking people down. Now it's always good to get some outside advisors to make you think of the tough questions, but these are the people that will gather together. Maybe on a conference call gather together. Maybe you can't come in rooms where you're at, right? We got some clients in New York that are like, Brian, we can't get anybody together. This city's in lockdown, even though the mayor said you can't lock New York down, and they lock New York down, right? So you can get together and have conference calls. You can have video chats. You can bring small groups together, and just get them to start listening about all the things for the next 18 months they need to think about, with the premise this is going to continue. Now, I got some pushback about, Brian, you're doom and gloom. I'm not doom and gloom. I want you to be prepared. And if you're in a war, I'm an old soldier. If you're running a issue campaign, predict that the enemy on the other side, this virus, is going to do its damnedest to cause you harm and succeed anyway. Predict that the army on the other side of that hill you've got to take is big and monumental and dangerous, and they're going to do everything right to defeat you, and then beat it anyway. That's my point. That's why I'm predicting for 18 months, because if it's shorter than that, great. I'd love it to be done in 2 weeks. That's not strategy. All right. So get that team together, start to have them map out their ideas. So look, this is generally speaking, this is kind of a template of how your team does this. First off, the research. I've already done a little bit of the research. This particular issue, you should already have your goals for your company personally. Whatever those goals are, you should have them. You need to do additional research on this new scenario that's occurred. This new scenario is a pandemic. Now you got to start to get your team to plan, assign teams, and then you're going to go round after round, flushing out these issues and prioritizing. And this, I just want you to have this as a template graph.
Ron, real quick, I was going to hold this to the end, but you mentioned the word template, and we got a question about this, and we've actually received some emails ourselves. There are lots of companies that are putting out templates right now. What's the difference between running these games and having an organization do this for you, and then just using this template and pulling it out and using that? Because obviously it's a lot cheaper to just buy a template offline and go that way. And we had some questions beforehand.
Yeah. Okay. So why can't I just get a template and build my crisis response plan, my strategy plan, off of answering questions that somebody else posed at some point in the past, right? Man, I wish it was that easy. And I'm going to beg you, don't do it. The problem with our education system is it's based on a model from Germany in the late 1800s. It doesn't teach people to problem solve in depth. What it does is it puts people in little lanes. It puts them in boxes. And the problem with these templates is it'll put you in a box and not have your team to think. It stops you from thinking. And it would be nice and easy for me to give you a template. I probably sound really professional. Here's the template that Brian and Adrian want to give you, and just follow that template, and we could charge you money for the template, and that would be awesome. Don't do it. What if some of the things your organization needs to do is not in those questions? Let people actually think, let them digest, let them stretch their brains. And I even got nervous about providing this war game template. It's not really a template, it's a model that allows people to brainstorm successfully. It allows them to kind of competitive. If you give your teams, whoever comes up with the most things we need to think about wins. They're going to come up with more things, and it's in a safe environment to compete. It's in a safe environment to explore ideas. If you say, whoever comes up with the top 5 things that we need to be thinking about is going to be winners. I mean, you're going to give a piece of chocolate to them. What? It doesn't have to be about prizes and ribbons and stuff, but it makes them think outside the box. And a template will put you in a box. It'll really limit your strategic ability. So please, no templates. I got one of them last night, and it was just a farce. It was lazy. Don't be lazy about this. Take some time to think. So no templates. Good, great question for that. All right, let's start cutting some examples. So let's assume for a minute your teams are set up, and let's say that Brian, Chase, and Adrian on one of your teams, and you've got some other people that are not as awesome as we are, and then you got another team that's more awesome than we are, right? And you've charged us going, I need you guys to fundamentally think about the things that could hurt our business that we need to start to navigate right now with this pandemic. And I came up with a toilet paper example. I found this and I love it because because everybody's freaking out about toilet paper right now, right? And it's so silly. And do people know that this virus doesn't even have toilet paper issues? Okay, I don't need to get into it, but there's no toilet paper issues with this. But here's the jam. The first thing, let's assume you have to get products in. So we say we need to worry about our supply chain. How are we going to get the products necessary to produce the goods and services we do? I don't know if your company produces products at all, but this would be one example of a company that comes up with. And the way that it would map out is in the first round, they would identify supply chain. And then you'd say, great, supply chain is certainly an issue we have. And then you break the teams back up and say, now go work on the supply chain issues, some of the things we could do about it. And then they would do some research. And you would know that the toilet paper supply line in the country, and these are real facts, is basically we have about 17 days of inventory in warehouses. And the only reason it didn't get to the stores fast enough is because it's got to be shipped and it's got to be requested faster. And grocery stores, as an example, don't have a method to rapidly, when a shelf is empty, to immediately order things. What they do is they have a predictive analysis of, we order toilet paper based on buying habits every 8 days. In 8 days, we order this amount. And the supply chain couldn't correct for the massive buyout that occurred. So not their fault, it's all the crazies' fault, that they weren't ready to change their buying habits. It's in warehouses. We just got to get it quicker. Now the warehouse people, the people that actually make the toilet paper, now they've got to move a little quicker. Unlike luxury goods, so if you produce luxury goods, not staples, are you slowing down your ordering process because people are probably going to be buying a little bit of less luxury goods right now, like handbags? So you need to be looking at potentially the supply chain. Another example is, I'm sorry, this was a great graph. This was not one of mine, but I found this for you. Is this supply chain? They call it the Bullwhip Impact out there. If you do have to order supplies, you need to be aware of this. Your team now needs to dig into this and figure out how to speed up the ordering process. So these are the kind of things that your rapid response team, once they identify the issue, then they have to go start working the problem. So they would identify that the Bullwhip Impact exists, and then what can your team do to start planning for it, ordering appropriately, and realizing the stress that could be on different supply lines.
And just to clarify, I don't think we're talking about in strategy, I see this coming, I need to fill my warehouse completely full, but you do need to have that plan. Like that, you do need to.
Well, what Chase is saying, maybe you do need to overstock. Maybe you don't need to overstock, right? I mean, my house, we didn't need to buy any toilet paper. We didn't need to overstock that. We have a 10-day supply because my wife always keeps a 10-day supply. I don't know why. I asked her. She goes, I don't know, 10 days. She doesn't know how much toilet paper. Probably she does, about 10 days, right? But you do need to plan for, if it's a 17-day cycle to get the supplies, but you're going out of it quicker because you have staples that got to get out. Maybe you got to ramp up your 17-day process instead of ordering every 8 days to every 5 days. So these are things you can start to plan and not get caught dead in the water. All right. And I thought this example was really, really important because of what happened in 2008. And I think a lot of us remember that, is that the leaders sped up their sensitivity to market changes. And this graph really shows that the ones that were predictive, like you all are going to do, predicting how to speed up your own supply chain, how to speed up those requests, survived and thrived during that massive hit in the face of 2008. The laggers, a lot of them never could correct it in time, and they went bye-bye. So that's why just that one thing of predicting your supply lane could really impact your business. Our company, we don't buy supplies. I mean, cleaning products maybe, but you know, we provide a service, so that's not an issue that we've got.
And I've got a question, Brian, that we've just received. The question relates to what's going on in California at the time. Residents are being urged to stay home. Businesses are shutting down, and this particular person thinks that it's coming this way as well. So how do you navigate your business cycle when you have variables that are beyond your control?
Well, see, and that's the word. Variables beyond your control, right? And that's the thing that crushes organizations when they automatically be like, well, what the government does is out of our control. Sure it is, but your response to it isn't out of your control. Your response to it is totally within your control, right? And so Chase, we mountain bike race. He's a little better at it than I am, just a little bit. Second in the nation last year.
Something like that.
Yeah, right. Second in the nation in the state in the national championship. So one of the things he'll say is a lot of people in racing right now are slacking off because all these races have been canceled. Well, it doesn't mean that you can't train even harder right now. I hope none of the racers are watching this, that you can't train even harder right now to predict that the races are going to come back on. You don't have to sit around. You don't have to take a nap. You don't have to sleep. You can predict the government shutdown. You can predict things are going to close. Now, I'm not saying that it can't have a devastating impact on your business. If you're in a hospitality industry, if you're in a restaurant, a hotel, if you don't have enough cash flow, it can be devastating. So you got to do the best you can do. I'm not saying it's not tough, but can you predict, okay, if the government shuts down for 3 months, what do we need to do? If the government shuts us down for 7 months, if we go shutting down, opening up, shutting down, opening up, how do we market? How do we get people in? Can you start to prepare for that? I hope so. We've got a couple restaurants as clients, and we're starting to try to navigate it. It's a mess, but strategy is about realizing that mess is coming and predicting it. The government is changing FMLA laws. They're changing paid sick leave. They're going to change the tax rolls. Understand what's happening, do your intel, and then have your team split them up into pods. One team can be responsible for figuring out the logistics problem. One team can figure out how do we respond to the government. One team could be, and this is giving me my next example that I want to get to, is do we need to adjust the structure of our organization right now? Nimble organizations are going to do fare much better than ones that have hierarchy structure. And so I provided you this. I got this out of a Harvard business something. It said Harvard on it, and it was a guy I know, and it's a really smart guy. And so I stole it from him. I will call him up and tell him I stole it from him. But the organizations we know are going to thrive are the ones that are not. They're more nimble. And so the organization 2 is where they have distributed leadership, not centralized leadership. They have a dispersed workforce. They're cross-trained generalists, where people can do multiple jobs instead of all the specialists that we've been trained to do for the last 15 to 20 years. So is this something your team needs to look at? Is this something you need to start making adjustments? This is within your control. This is not outside of their control. So if we were on your rapid response team, maybe we'd start to explore this. All right. And then another one example was the cybersecurity issues, the things you need to think about for cybersecurity. These are just 3 examples of maybe the 50 that you're going to do. Now, I got to get to how to prioritize the things that are going to come up in our last few minutes together. Yeah. So the key is now you've got this big list of things that your team thought we needed to deal with. And remember, brainstorming is about yes, not shuttling. But now it's starting to be about ranking and prioritizing those issues. Your teams come back, now you got a list of 25 things. As an example, it could be, I hate when I say a number 25 and people say I have to have 25 things. No, it could be 5 things, it could be 50 things. I don't know how many's on your list. Now you got to prioritize. Here's the best way to prioritize. Start building the list off of the most likely scenario to actually happen based on your research. Make the list from top down on likely scenarios to happen. It's very likely you're going to be shut down for 2 weeks. It's a little less likely you're going to be shut down for 18 months. It's a little bit more likely you can be shuttled down for off and on for 6 months, right? So, and the best way to prioritize is to have your team rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 of how likely they could occur independently of each other. Get the average, and that's a good baseline. That's just a good, but you've got to put numbers, you've got to put math attached to it. You can't just be like, I think that could happen. Maybe that could happen. That should happen. You've got to put math attached to it because it makes it real. And if you make them actually rank them, if you have 20 items, they can only have the first is well, go with the biggest number. The 20th is the most likely to happen. One's the least likely to happen, and make them prioritize. And then you start taking the average number. If that makes sense. I feel like I'm running these war games so quickly for them, but hopefully you get that. If you have questions, let us know, email us or call us. But you gotta rank it with math. And then the next step on the ranking is to determine what you can actually control. What are the things you can actually deal with what now, and what can you not? Like, so if somebody says, we need to plan for aliens to descend upon us in UFOs and liquidate us all. Well, that's going to be a really low priority because the reality is probably not going to happen. And if it does, probably can't do much about it anyway. So yeah, it's a really good idea, Chase. It's a really good idea to plan for UFOs coming down and gutting us. The likelihood of that happening so far removed, it's a really good idea, Chase, but let's deprioritize that and worry about some things that are a little bit more likely to happen, Chase. You're really smart. And to deprioritize that item. So that's kind of an extreme example, but you've got to rank them and then start to assign people to give you solutions to each one of those top 3. As soon as you got solutions, put them in the bank, go to the next 3 and repeat this. Companies fail because they either got a poor plan, they don't execute plan well, or they got no plan at all, right? And I love this slide because I don't want you to fail. I need to end with something more positive than this, actually. So I don't know if we've got time for a couple more. I don't know if we got time for a couple more questions, but the gist of this, get your team to spend some time every week right now planning for the long-term future. Long-term, not next week. Don't have them come together and talk about next week. Those are all tactical stuff. You still need to do that. But you've got to come together and start talking about the future and start to assign people to spend some of their day planning for long-term stuff, months out, worst case scenario. And that's the way competitive intelligence and war games are already just, yeah.
And hey, Brian, just want to let everyone know today that we're doing consultations next week. We have 6 slots remaining. And if you'd like to speak more in depth about your unique circumstances relevant to your business, then we'd love to hear from you. We have 1-hour flat fee arrangements, and we've adjusted our model to be more conscious of your business needs. And so you have our telephone number, our email address. Please reach out to us. We'd love to work with you and do more.
Okay, so I guess Adrian's saying is that, based on our research, what the team decided last week is we're changing our model. Normally we go like month-to-month contracts at minimum to help people navigate through business disruptions, and you've opened up hourly slots.
That's correct.
Okay, so if you guys want an hourly slot to help navigate and walk through this a little bit more, call Adrian or Chase and we can help you do that. Let's take 1 or 2 questions.
I got a question from a text message. You talked about the plan and we talked about prioritizing, writing things down. Where do you put it? Like, does this thing go in a binder and go in a filing cabinet somewhere? What's the next step once you have it? What do you do with it?
planning is everything, and plans are really not that much, right? And I think it wasn't Patton that said that, it was Churchill Eisenhower. I can't remember right now, but just the act of planning for these contingencies is awesome. But once you have one of these issues, like let's take once again the logistics issue, right? And you've assigned that to your team, they're going to come up with some tactics that you need to do. Start assigning those out. Start to go in and sign up and make people responsible for those individual tactical items as you go. For the ones that you're not assigning any tactics, go ahead and build the tactics out and just leave it on your desk. You can certainly put it in a binder, but I'm not asking you to build some sort of large 70-page binder document that you're never going to open again. Instead, turn all these strategies into things that you can do to start to get ready for the next few months. And if they're not something you're going to do for 2 months, well, just put it aside and then repeat this process in a month. Repeat it every month or so as you start to build out the tactics that meet with these strategies. So like the cybersecurity, the tactic for the cybersecurity is, hey, don't open up any crazy links. People are going to really try to hack into our systems right now. Follow these protocols. Don't open up any critical links. Don't share your passwords. All things you should be doing anyway. But once you've reminded your team to do that and reminding them again, that strategy is done. You've now protected yourself from cybersecurity attacks that are they're going to rise, by the way, right now. I mean, hackers are going to have a field day with all us doing this online. You got one more? Or?
Yeah. I've got another one. It's about the suppliers that you talked about earlier. You know, you can only do so much. What if your supplier doesn't have a plan? Like what do you do when you have a plan, but your supplier doesn't have a strategic plan?
I'll tell you what, I love that question. All right, is you do need to determine whether or not your vendors are doing the same thing you're doing. And if they're not, let's send them this video if you like it, or tell them to start getting prepared and ask them what their plan is. And they'll start shopping for the vendors that are going to be around, they're going to navigate this cleanly as possible and get ready for it. And so yeah, I think you need to check with your teammates, your vendors, your providers, to make sure that your team is thinking long-term, thinking strategically also, and not just on tactics. I'm going to shut it down now because I want to keep these to 30 minutes. I hope you got some value out of this. And if you do want to contact, you can email me. Somebody will set you a time slot, and we can do that for you. If not, we'll probably host another one of these if we keep getting enough questions and people find it valuable. So look, I'm glad you're here. I know you're going to navigate really cleanly as possible. Just start thinking about all those scenarios and leverage the people, your team, to come up with more ideas than you could come up with on your own. I think you'll start to progress really nicely. Okay, thanks everybody.